The first thing Elian Vera noticed was the silence. Not the calm, peaceful silence of early morning fields or sleeping streets beside long American highways glowing with distant truck lights. This silence felt watchful, as if the air itself was holding a breath that had lasted for years. The small fishing boat that carried him across the grey water had stopped far from the shore. The guide refused to move closer. He would not explain why, only lifted a trembling hand and pointed through the drifting mist. An island waited there, barely visible. More suggestion than land. Wrapped in pale fog that moved like slow breathing. Elian stepped down onto the narrow wooden dock alone. The boards were damp and cold beneath his shoes. Behind him, the guide pushed the boat away without goodbye. The engine sound faded into distance. Then even the water grew quiet. No birds circled above. No insects hummed in the air. No wind touched the trees. Only the soft hollow rhythm of waves touching stone. Again, and again, and again. He tightened his coat though the cold was not strong. Something else pressed against his skin. A strange weight in the atmosphere. Like standing inside a memory that did not belong to him. He had traveled across half the country to reach this forgotten place. From crowded bus stations filled with tired travelers and vending machine light. From roadside diners where strangers spoke about work sports and rising prices. From a silent apartment where unopened letters rested beside an empty chair. All of it already felt distant. Like scenes from another life. Inside his pocket rested the photograph that began everything. A faded image of a broken shoreline. Black water stretching into fog. Tall stone pillars rising from the tide like the remains of something ancient. And near the edge, a shadow shaped almost like a person. The photo arrived with no return address. Only a short message written in uneven, careful ink. You already know why you must come back. Back. The word made no sense when he first read it. He had never seen this island. Never heard its name. Never remembered anything like the shoreline in the picture. Yet the moment his fingers touched the paper, a feeling moved through him. Not recognition. Something deeper. Heavier. Grief without a clear reason. For weeks he tried to ignore it. He kept working. Answered polite questions. Smiled at neighbors in narrow hallways. Pretended his nights were ordinary. But sleep slowly changed. Dreams returned again and again with the same distant sound. Waves striking stone in slow rhythm. Mist breathing across dark water. Footsteps stopping just behind him before he could turn. Each morning he woke with the same quiet certainty. Something was waiting. Somewhere. So he began to search. Old coastal records. Forgotten survey maps stored in silent library rooms. Shipping logs written by hands long gone. Nothing official showed the island. Yet sometimes in the margins of damaged pages, there were warnings written quickly as if time had run short. Do not land when the mist moves inland. No wildlife remains after nightfall. Shadows seen standing in water. Many notes ended mid-sentence, as if the writers never returned to finish. That was when curiosity changed into something else. Something pulling. Patient and certain. And now he was here. He took his first step away from the dock. The sound felt too loud in the stillness. Mist shifted gently between the trees ahead, revealing a narrow path climbing into darkness. The forest looked wrong. Not dead, but paused. Leaves unmoving. Branches frozen in shapes that felt almost deliberate. He listened for the guide one last time. Nothing answered. Completely alone. Most people would have turned back long before this moment. Would have thrown away the strange photograph. Chosen safety and ordinary days. But Elian had lived most of his life feeling slightly misplaced. Growing up in small roadside towns where everyone else shared stories he did not know. Moving from city to city searching for a sense of arrival that never stayed. There is a quiet loneliness many people carry without speaking. Standing inside busy streets yet somehow outside the moment. Elian understood that feeling well. So when something unknown finally called to him, even without words, he listened. The path upward was soft with fallen needles and damp soil. The air carried a faint metallic scent, like rain that never reached the ground. Step by step, the shoreline behind him disappeared into white. Soon the dock was gone. Then the water. Then even the direction he came from. Only the path remained, leading deeper between silent trees. Time felt strange here, stretched thin, uncertain. After a long quiet walk, he saw the first sign, a stone marker beside the trail, half buried in earth, covered with dark moss, carved with symbols worn smooth by years of weather. Not letters from any language he knew, yet something in their shape stirred a distant ache, like hearing part of a melody remembered from childhood. His hand moved toward the stone, slow, hesitant. The moment his fingers touched the cold surface, the forest exhaled. A faint sound traveled through the mist ahead. Not wind, not an animal. Footsteps, soft, careful, stopping whenever he tried to listen closely. His heartbeat quickened, fear rising, but beneath it, certainty. Something new he had arrived. He forced himself to keep walking, because turning back now felt impossible, like trying to wake from a dream that had already chosen its ending. The path curved upward toward a ridge of black stone. Fog gathered thicker there, swirling low across the ground like living breath. With each step, the temperature dropped. His breath turned visible, slow and pale. Near the top, the trees ended without warning. Beyond them, the land opened into a wide broken shoreline exactly like the photograph. Dark water stretching toward an unseen horizon. Stone pillars rising from the tide at uneven angles. Some standing, some fallen, all silent. And there, at the far edge where mist touched sea, a shape moved. Too tall to be human, too still to be an animal. Only a deeper darkness inside the fog. Elian stopped breathing. The photograph had shown only stillness. But this shadow was alive, waiting. A memory tried to surface inside his mind. Sharp and painful, almost visible. Cold water closing around him. A distant voice calling his name. Hands slipping away beneath waves. He staggered slightly, gripping a rock for balance. Why did this place feel like loss? Like something taken long ago. The shadow near the water shifted again. Slow, patient, not approaching, not leaving, watching. Then from somewhere behind him in the empty forest, a whisper, so faint it might have been imagination. You came back. He turned quickly. No one stood there. Only mist between silent trees. When he faced the shoreline again, the shadow had moved closer. Not walking, not drifting, simply nearer. Close enough that its outline almost resembled a human form. Almost. Every instinct told him to run, to escape the island, to forget this place forever. Yet beneath the fear, another feeling grew stronger. Recognition. As if the island had waited only for him. For a very long time. And now that waiting was ending. Water touched the shore in slow repeating rhythm. Like a heartbeat older than memory. A terrifying truth formed quietly in his mind. Whatever guarded this lost shore already knew who he was. Perhaps even who he used to be. The mist thickened, swallowing the last light of afternoon. The shadow lifted slightly. Not quite an arm. More like a silent invitation. Or a warning. Inside his chest a question finally rose. One he had tried not to ask since the photograph arrived. If this island had called him back, what had happened here before? And what ancient presence inside the fog was still waiting to finish it? Elian did not remember deciding to move closer to the water. Yet moments later he was already walking down the dark slope of stone. Each step slow, careful, as if the ground might disappear beneath him. The shadow near the shoreline did not retreat. It remained where the mist touched the sea, waiting with a patience that felt older than thought. A quiet pressure filled the air. Not sound, not wind. Something deeper. Like the island itself was listening. Halfway down the slope, Elian felt a sudden dizziness. The world tilted gently. then steadied again. Images flickered at the edge of his mind. Sunlight on bright water. Laughter carried by warm air. A wooden pier that looked new instead of broken. Voices calling from somewhere behind him. The vision vanished as quickly as it came, leaving only the grey cold present. He stopped walking. His breathing had changed. Too fast. Too shallow. This was not only fear. It was memory trying to return. For years his past had felt incomplete. Childhood moving from town to town. Stories that ended without clear reason. Photographs missing from family boxes. Questions he learned not to ask. Standing on this forgotten shore, those empty spaces inside him began to ache. The shadow shifted again, closer now to the edge of the water, its outline almost shaped like shoulders, like a head slightly bowed. Not threatening, not welcoming, only waiting. Elian forced himself to speak, his voice rough from cold and uncertainty. "Why am I here?" The words sounded small against the open water. No echo returned, only the slow rhythm of waves touching stone. For a long moment nothing changed. Then the mist moved inward, curling across the shoreline, reaching toward his feet. With it came a sound. Soft, layered, almost like many distant voices speaking at once beneath water. Not language, not quite, but filled with feeling. Loss, calling, warning. Elian's chest tightened, because part of him understood. Another memory surfaced. Stronger this time. A storm darkening the sky. Rain striking the sea in sharp, endless lines. Someone shouting his name through wind. Hands gripping his shoulders, turning him toward a small boat fighting the waves. Fear. Urgency. Goodbye. The vision shattered. He fell to one knee on the cold stone, gasping. The island was not unknown to him. He had been here before. The realization arrived without details. Only certainty. Somewhere in the past, something had happened on this shore. Something powerful enough to erase itself from memory, but not powerful enough to disappear completely. The shadow by the water lifted slightly. Again that almost human motion. And inside Elian's mind, a single feeling formed. Not threat. Recognition. He pushed himself back to his feet, legs unsteady but moving. If answers existed, they were here. Not in the safe distant world he left behind. Step by step he reached the flat stones near the tide. The air grew colder, each breath sharp in his lungs. The mist circled slowly around both of them. Man and shadow. Like a boundary closing. Only a few steps remained between them now. Up close, the figure looked less solid, edges shifting like smoke in slow motion. Yet at its center, darkness deeper than night. Elian felt no desire to run anymore, only a quiet pull forward. He stopped at the final distance, close enough that the cold from the water touched his face. For several heartbeats. Nothing happened. Then the sound beneath the waves grew louder. That lead whisper of many voices. Images poured suddenly into his mind. Not gentle this time. Not fragments. A memory breaking open. Years earlier, the island had not been silent. Lights glowed along the shoreline. Temporary buildings stood where only ruins remained now. People moved with purpose carrying equipment and maps. Researchers. Explorers. Dreamers chasing discovery. And among them, a younger Elian, hopeful, certain the journey would change his life. He felt again the excitement of arrival, the warmth of friendship forming quickly in isolation. Long nights beside portable lamps studying strange symbols carved into ancient stone. They believed the island held history never recorded, proof of something older than known civilization. But the deeper they searched, the stranger the signs became. Animals avoided the interior forest. Compasses failed without reason. Sleep filled with shared dreams of standing figures in fog. Warnings they ignored, because discovery felt more important than caution. Until the night the tide changed. Water rising too fast. Mist moving inland against the wind. Voices heard clearly where no one stood. Panic spreading through the camp. Orders shouted. Boats prepared in darkness. Elian remembered running along this same shoreline. Rain striking his face. Someone gripping his arm. A woman with determined eyes refusing to leave without him. The memory blurred before her name appeared. Only emotion remained. Trust. Fear. Promise. They reached the final boat as waves crashed against stone. Others already pushing away from shore. Then the mist thickened. Not natural. Not slow. Alive. Shapes forming within it. Tall. Watching. The same shadow that stood before him now. Terror unlike anything he had known. Hands pulling him toward the boat. Water rising around their legs. And then, a choice. Someone had to stay behind. To hold the line securing the boat. To give the others seconds needed to escape. He remembered arguing. Refusing. The woman shouting over the storm. Not in anger. In certainty. The rope forced into his hands. Her voice telling him to live. Then a wave between them. When the water fell back. She was gone. Taken by mist. Or sea. Or something older waiting beneath both. The boat carried him away screaming into darkness. Memory breaking apart under shock and grief. Until nothing remained. The vision ended. Elian stood trembling on the present shore. Tears cold against his skin before he realized they had fallen. He understood now. Why the photograph said come back. Because he had never truly left. Part of him had remained on this island. Bound to the moment of loss. To the shadow in the mist. To the unanswered question of what really happened that night. The figure before him moved for the first time with clear intention. Slowly. It raised an arm shaped from darkness and drifting fog. Not toward him. Toward the water. The sea answered. Waves pulling back farther than natural. Revealing wet black stone hidden beneath the surface. At the center of the exposed ground. Something stood. A doorway carved into rock older than the broken pillars. Covered in the same worn symbols as the forest marker. A place not revealed during the storm years ago. Or perhaps a place he had been meant to see only now. The mist. The shadow. The lost memories. All leading here. Fear returned. But different. Quieter. Because beneath it lived purpose. The island had not called him back for punishment. It had called him back to finish something unfinished. To face whatever waited beyond that ancient doorway. The shadow lowered its arms slowly. As if the invitation had been given. Choice now belonged only to him. Behind him lay the empty world he knew. Safe. Ordinary. Incomplete. Ahead. The truth buried beneath years of silence. And perhaps, the answer to whether the one he lost was truly gone. Elian stepped forward toward the exposed stone. The cold water closed around his boots. Numbing. Real. Each step heavier than the last. Yet he did not stop. Because for the first time since that distant storm, he felt closer to the past instead of running from it. Closer to the voice that once told him to live. Closer to the shadow that had waited all these years. When he reached the doorway, the mist behind him sealed the shoreline from sight. Only darkness remained ahead. Deep. Silent. Endless. He hesitated at the threshold. One final moment where turning back was still possible. Then a new sound rose from within the stone passage. Not whispering voices. Not waves. A single slow breath. As if something inside had been waiting much longer than he had. And now, knew he was finally here. Elian stood at the edge of the doorway with the cold sea pressing around his boots. The stone beneath the water felt smooth. Worn by time older than memory. Older than the storm that had broken his past into silence. Behind him the mist erased the shoreline completely. There was no path back. No sky. No sound of the open world he once knew. Only the quiet breath rising from the darkness ahead. It was slow. Measured. Almost calm. Not the breathing of an animal. Not the movement of wind through a tunnel. Something aware. For a long moment Elian did nothing. His heart beat so loudly he felt it in his throat. Every instinct told him this doorway was not meant for the living. Yet another feeling stood beside the fear. Stronger now. Clearer. The same pull that brought him across the country. The same unfinished thread tied to the night of the storm. If he turned away again, the silence inside him would never end. So he stepped forward. The water fell away after only a few steps. Cold stone rising beneath his feet. Dry. Untouched by the sea. Darkness closed around him slowly. Not complete. A faint grey glow traced the carved symbols along the walls. Just enough light to move. The air inside felt different. Still. Heavy. Like a place sealed away from time. Each step carried a soft echo that returned a moment too late. As if the passage were deeper than it appeared. Elian tried to steady his breathing. To think clearly. But memory kept pressing closer. The woman on the shore. Her voice in the storm. The promise he never understood. Live. The word had followed him for years without meaning. Now it felt like a command not yet finished. The tunnel curved gently downward, leading farther beneath the island. As he walked, the carved symbols along the walls began to change. At first they were only shapes, lines crossing in patterns older than language. Then slowly, they formed images. Tall figures standing beside water. Circles carved above their heads like distant moons. Waves rising toward them but never touching. Further along, the images darkened. Figures falling. Mist covering the ground. One shape remaining while others disappeared into shadow. Elian's chest tightened. This was not decoration. It was history. A story told in stone long before he was born. And somehow, he knew the ending of that story had not happened yet. The passage opened suddenly into a wide chamber. The ceiling rose high above. Lost in darkness. The faint grey glow gathered at the center of the floor. There, a pool of perfectly still water waited. Black as night. Smooth like glass. No ripple. No reflection of the tunnel behind him. Only depth without end. Elian stopped at the edge. The slow breathing sound came from the water. Not loud, but certain, as if something beneath the surface slept lightly, aware of every movement above. Fear returned sharper than before, because this place felt older than danger, older than death. Yet mixed with the fear was grief. Deep. Familiar. He had stood near this water once before. The realization came quietly. Not as memory. As truth. The storm. The escape. The loss. They had not been the end. Something else happened after. Something buried even deeper inside him. The surface of the pool trembled gently. One small ripple spreading outward. Then another. Elian did not move. Could not. Because shapes were forming beneath the water. Not clear. Not whole. Fragments of light and shadow gathering slowly. A face. Then another. Voices followed. Soft. Layered. The same distant whisper he heard on the shore. Not words. Only feeling. Calling. Waiting. Remembering. His knees weakened. He sank slowly to the stone beside the pool. Tears came without warning. Because he understood what he was seeing. The people who never left the island. The explorers. The dreamers. The lost. Not gone. Not free. Held here. Somewhere between memory and silence. A deeper ripple crossed the water. Stronger. Intentional. The forming faces faded. Drawn downward into darkness. Something else was rising. The breathing grew louder. Filling the chamber. Steady as a heartbeat. Elian felt the air grow colder. Pressure building inside his chest. Then the surface broke. Not with violence. With calm certainty. A shape lifted slowly from the black water. Tall. Familiar. Made of shadow and drifting mist. The same presence from the shore. But clearer now. Defined. And within its shifting outline. A human form almost visible. Elian's breath stopped. Because beneath the darkness, he recognized her. Not fully. Not in detail, but in feeling deeper than sight. The woman from the storm. The one who told him to live. Grief and hope collided inside him, too strong to hold apart. He tried to speak. Her name still lost somewhere in broken memory. The shadow figure tilted its head slightly. A gesture gentle, almost sad. Then a sound reached him. Not through the air. Through his mind. "You left." The voice was distant, like echo through deep water, yet unmistakably hers. Pain cut through him. "I tried to come back." The answer formed inside his thoughts before he knew he would speak. The shadow remained still. The water around it darkened, spreading slowly across the pool. "You forgot." The words carried no anger, only truth. Elian closed his eyes, tears falling freely now. Yes, he had forgotten. Not by choice, but by fear too heavy to carry. The chamber trembled softly, stone whispering against stone. Memories surged again, stronger than before. Not only the storm. After the escape. Hospitals. Questions. Silence he could not explain. Nights filled with water and voices. Days spent pretending nothing was missing. Until even the pretending erased the past. The shadow moved closer to the edge of the pool. Still unable to leave the water. Still bound to the darkness below. Something holds us. The thought reached him like fading light. Not the sea. Not the storm. Older. Elian forced himself to stand, though his legs shook. "How do I free you?" For the first time. The shadow's shape flickered with something like warmth. Live. The same word from years ago. But now he understood. Not survival. Not escape. To carry the truth back into the world. To remember what happened here. To end the silence that trapped them. The chamber shook harder. Cracks forming along the distant walls. The black water began to rise. Slow at first. Then faster. The presence beneath the pool was waking. Not her. Something deeper. Ancient. Patient. The real guardian of the lost shore. The shadow looked toward the rising darkness. Then back to Elian. "Go." The command filled his mind with sudden force. Stone split with a thunderous sound. Water spilling across the chamber floor. Elian hesitated only one heartbeat, because leaving again felt like betrayal. But staying would change nothing. He turned toward the tunnel, running as cold water chased his steps. Behind him, the chamber roared to life with silent fury. And through it all, one final feeling reached him from the shadow in the rising dark. Not goodbye. Release. As he reached the passage, a shock of memory finally broke free inside him. Her name. Not spoken, but known. And with it, the truth of what waited beneath the island. Not a prison. A gate. Holding something the world was never meant to see. Elian ran toward the fading grey light of the tunnel entrance. Heart pounding. Breath burning. Because he understood now. Freeing the lost was only the beginning. Whatever ancient force guarded this shore was rising with him. Elian ran through the bending tunnel as the sound of rising water chased him from the chamber below. The grey light ahead trembled like a distant memory trying to fade. Cold air pushed toward him in uneven breaths. Behind him something vast was waking fully. Not fast. Not wild. Certain. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the island itself were testing his will to leave. But he kept moving, because for the first time the fear inside him carried direction. Not confusion. He was not running away. He was carrying something forward. The tunnel floor began to tilt upward. Stone growing rough beneath his hands as he climbed. The carved symbols along the walls glowed brighter now. Not grey, but pale silver like distant moonlight beneath water. Images flashed across their surface as he passed. Waves breaking against empty shores. Figures standing guard beside a sealed gate. Generations arriving. Generations vanishing. An endless watching. The truth settled slowly inside him. This island had never been abandoned. It had always been guarded. Not by walls. Not by weapons. By memory. By the living who escaped. And the lost who remained. The passage narrowed suddenly, forcing him to turn sideways to keep moving. Cold mist poured downward through the tight stone like breath from another world. The roar behind him deepened, still without sound, yet shaking through bone and thought. Whatever rose beneath the chamber was not bound only to water. It was bound to forgetting. And Elian had remembered. That was why it was waking. A final turn opened ahead, light spilling through broken stone. The shoreline. He pushed forward with the last of his strength, falling onto wet black rock as open air struck his lungs. The sky above the island had darkened into heavy twilight, mist rolling faster across the water. No wind, yet everything moving. The tall pillars in the sea trembled slightly, ancient stone answering a call older than time. Elian tried to stand, his legs barely listening, cold spreading through his body from the climb. For a moment he thought he was too late. Then he saw the shadow at the edge of the tide. Still there, but changing. The drifting darkness around her form was thinning, breaking apart like smoke touched by morning light. She was no longer only shadow, a shape clearer than before, not fully human, yet closer with every breath. Relief and sorrow rose together inside him, so strong it hurt. He stepped toward the water slowly, afraid the moment might vanish if he moved too fast. The sea pulled back again just as before, revealing the carved doorway far below, now glowing faintly from the power rising beneath. Cracks of pale light spread across the exposed stone, like something inside was pushing upward. The guardian, not a creature of anger, not a mind of cruelty, a force built for one purpose: to keep the gate closed, no matter the cost. And the gate was opening. The shadow woman lifted her face toward him, features still soft and unfinished, yet filled with recognition that needed no memory. You remember. The words touched his mind like warmth after endless cold. Yes. His voice broke though he had not spoken aloud. Pain crossed her fading form. Not from suffering. From release arriving too late for the years already lost. The island trembled harder, small stones sliding into the returning tide. You must leave. The message came gently, but beneath it lived urgency. Elian shook his head. Not in refusal. In grief. I will not leave you again. For the first time. A faint brightness moved within her shadowed outline. Something like a smile remembered from another life. You are not leaving me. The sea surged forward suddenly, water crashing across the exposed rock, forcing him back several steps. Light burst from the doorway below, a silent column rising into the mist, turning the fog above into swirling silver fire. The ancient force beneath the island was no longer sleeping. Elian felt it searching, not with eyes, with awareness spreading through water and stone. It felt memory returning, truth breaking silence, and it would not allow the gate to open fully. The pillars in the sea began to fracture, long cracks racing upward through their dark surfaces. The entire shore was becoming unstable, moments from collapse. Panic tried to rise inside him, but something stronger held it still. Understanding. This had never been about escape. It had always been about balance. The lost could not return, but they could be freed. The living could not stay, but they could remember. That was the promise carried across years of silence. Live, not only to survive, but to bear witness. He stepped toward the water one last time, ignoring the freezing waves around his feet. What must I do? The question formed without fear now. Her shape flickered in the growing light, edges dissolving into drifting brightness. Tell them. 2 simple words, heavier than anything he had carried before. Tell them we were here. Tell them the gate must remain closed. Tell them forgetting is the only danger. The rising light from the sea intensified, turning night into blinding silver. The guardian was reaching the surface, not to destroy, to seal, to bury the island again beneath silence and storm. If Elian remained, He would be sealed with it. Memory ending once more. She drifted closer across the water. Not walking. Carried by the same light pulling her apart. No sorrow remained in her presence now. Only peace. You kept the promise. Tears blurred his vision. Because he understood. Living had never meant staying alive. It meant reaching this moment. Choosing memory over fear. The ground split with a deep silent fracture. Water exploding upward around the glowing doorway. Time was ending. Go. This time the word carried final certainty. Not command. Not request. Truth. Elian stepped back slowly. Every movement tearing against the part of him that wanted to remain. Her form was almost light now. Barely shaped like the woman he had lost. Yet more present than ever. He held her in his gaze. Refusing to look away. Refusing to forget even for a heartbeat. The mist rushed inward violently. Spiraling around the rising column of light. Stone pillars collapsed into the sea. One after another. Like the closing of ancient doors. At the final moment. Just before brightness erased her completely. A feeling reached him. Clearer than voice. Stronger than memory. Not goodbye. Home. The light consumed the shoreline. Instinct finally pulled him backward. Running across shaking ground toward the forest path. Behind him the ocean rose in a silent wall. Falling inward over the broken shore. Burying light. Stone. Gate. Everything. The force of it threw him forward onto dark soil beneath the trees. Then. Stillness. No roar. No wind. No movement. Only the soft sound of ordinary waves touching distant rock. Slow. Gentle. Empty. Elian lay there unable to breathe. Unable to think. Because the weight inside him had changed. The grief was still there. But no longer hollow. Filled now with meaning. With truth carried forward. Minutes passed. Or hours. Time had no shape. When he finally lifted himself from the ground. The mist was already thinning. The shoreline beyond the trees looked ordinary. Broken rocks. Quiet water. Nothing more. No pillars. No doorway. No shadow waiting in the tide. Only an empty coast that would soon disappear from memory again. But not his. Never again. Far out across the grey water. A small boat waited near the edge of sight. The guide had returned. Not looking toward the island. As if he already knew what must never be seen. Elian walked slowly down the silent path. Each step carrying the past with him. Not as burden. As promise. When he reached the dock. He paused once. Turning back toward the mist-covered shore. Nothing moved. Yet he felt it. Peace. A quiet presence no longer trapped between worlds. He stepped into the boat without speaking. The engine started softly, turning them away from the island. Water stretched wide toward the distant mainland. Toward cities filled with light and noise and ordinary days. Toward people who would never know how close forgetting had come to opening the gate. Elian watched the island fade into fog. Until even its outline disappeared. Only then did he close his eyes. Holding one final truth gently inside. Some places are meant to vanish. Not to hide darkness. But to protect the living from carrying too much of the past. And some promises are meant to last longer than memory. Morning arrived slowly over the open water. Not with bright color. Not with warmth. But with a quiet grey light that felt gentle after everything the night had carried. Elian sat near the front of the small boat. Hands resting loosely against cold metal. Eyes fixed on the place where the island had disappeared. There was nothing there now. Only drifting mist dissolving into ordinary sea air. Only waves moving without memory. Anyone passing this water would see emptiness. A stretch of coast forgotten by maps and stories. Yet inside him, the island remained clear. Sharp. Alive in a way the world beyond it could never understand. The guide did not speak. Not once since the engine turned toward the mainland. His face held the same distant calm as before. As if silence were part of an agreement older than both of them. Perhaps he had carried others here. Years ago. Decades ago. Watching them step onto the dock with questions they could not explain. Perhaps he had watched some return. And others never come back. Elian wondered how many promises rested quietly in this water. How many memories the sea kept without telling. The boat moved steadily forward, cutting a narrow path through soft morning waves. Far ahead, the faint outline of the mainland slowly appeared. Low buildings, harbour cranes, roads that would soon fill with ordinary traffic. Normal life waiting without knowing how close it had come to something ancient. A strange feeling settled inside his chest. Not relief. Not sadness. Something quieter. Completion. For years he had carried an emptiness he could never name. A missing piece shaped like a moment he could not remember. Now the emptiness was gone. But the space it left behind was not filled with happiness. It was filled with truth. And truth had weight. He closed his eyes briefly, letting the motion of the boat rise and fall beneath him. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he did not see the storm. He did not see the gate or the braking light. He saw her face as it might have been before the island. Before fear. Before loss. Not perfectly clear, but enough. And with it came the final understanding he had been moving toward since the photograph first reached his hands. Living was never meant to erase the past. Living was meant to carry it forward. Gently. Honestly. Without letting silence bury what mattered. The engine sound softened as the harbour drew closer. Gulls circled overhead. Their cries sharp and ordinary. Almost startling after so much stillness. Wooden docks creaked against slow water. Ropes pulled tight. Voices drifted across the morning air from unseen workers beginning another day. The world had continued. Unchanged. Unaware. Elian opened his eyes and watched it all carefully. As if seeing simple life for the first time. Every small sound felt meaningful. Every movement temporary and precious. The boat touched the dock with a quiet knock of wood against wood. No ceremony. No sign that anything extraordinary had happened beyond the mist. The guide secured the rope without looking at him. Then stepped back. Waiting. Elian stood slowly. His body still heavy with cold and memory. Yet stronger than when he first arrived. For a moment he remained there. Between water and land. Past and future. A final choice resting in silence. He reached into his coat pocket. Fingers brushing the faded photograph. The paper felt different now. Lighter somehow. As if its purpose had ended. He looked at the image one last time. The broken shoreline. The dark water. The shadow near the edge. But the shadow no longer felt frightening. Only distant. Like a doorway already closed. Carefully. He folded the photograph once. Then again. Not to hide it. To keep it safe. Because memory deserved care. Even when no one else would ever see it. He stepped onto the dock. Solid ground felt unfamiliar beneath his feet. Too certain. Too loud. People moved nearby without noticing him. Carrying tools. Drinking coffee. Talking about weather and schedules. Ordinary worries. Ordinary plans. He felt no distance from them now. Only quiet connection. They were living the simple moments the island had tried to protect. That was enough. The guide finally spoke. His voice low. Almost lost beneath the harbour sounds. You will not return. It was not a question. Elian shook his head gently. No. The word carried peace instead of regret. The guide studied him for a long silent breath. Then nodded once. As if something important had been confirmed. Without another word. He turned back toward the boat. Preparing for a journey that would likely never be spoken of. Elian walked away from the water slowly. Each step felt deliberate. Grounded. Real. The road beyond the harbour curved toward a small coastal town. Breakfast lights glowing in diner windows. Cars passing with soft rushing sound. Life continuing in quiet rhythm. He followed the road without hurry. Breathing in the scent of salt and distant coffee. Listening to the steady pulse of a world still turning. For the first time in many years. He did not feel lost inside it. He felt present. Days would pass, then weeks, then years. Memories of the island would soften at the edges, like all memories do, but they would not disappear, because he would tell the story. Not loudly, not to crowds searching for mystery. He would tell it carefully, to those who needed to understand why remembering matters. Perhaps in quiet classrooms, perhaps in small rooms where listeners carried their own unfinished grief. He would not speak of shadows or gates or ancient forces beneath the sea. He would speak of promises, of loss, of choosing to live honestly even when the past hurts. That truth was enough. And somewhere beyond maps and memory, beneath water older than history, the gate would remain closed, guarded not by fear, but by the simple act of one person remembering. The morning sun finally broke through the grey clouds, light spreading across rooftops and moving streets. Warmth touched his face. He stopped walking for a moment, letting the light rest there, not searching the horizon, not looking back, only standing inside a quiet beginning. Because endings are rarely loud, rarely clear. Sometimes they arrive softly, like mist lifting from water, leaving nothing behind except the chance to move forward. Elian breathed in slowly, then out, and with that single ordinary breath, the long waiting silence of the island finally, gently, let him go.